goblins and hobgoblins and gnolls, and I said, "Oh, gnolls." So I cast alter self on myself as a gnoll to try to talk our way through and gain the information we needed in this part of the city. And we started this roleplay encounter where we had met this guard who was guarding the entrance to Kyber's gate, and the guard was just like, "Hey, go halt! Oh, who goes there?" And on the spot, I'm just like, "All right, I need to choose how I'm gonna roleplay this gnoll I'm disguising myself as." And for whatever reason, I just went, "Hi, my name's Rucktuck. I'm a little lost down here. Perhaps you can help me." And just led to this series of increasingly ridiculous, very fun encounters of us making our way through the city. But that was my favorite moment in the campaign so far, playing as Varian. Pass it off to
the fact
anybody
that
else.
was your favorite part. That's unbelievable. And unfortunately, I've not had the chance to introduce any gnoll characters since then. But of course, when I introduce some gnoll characters anytime in the future, they're going to have horribly rough hillbilly accents to compensate for Carson's vision of these gnolls.
Carson's destroying Sharn one NPC at a time.
The funniest thing about that was just like one of the guys we talked to was a gnoll, and I had already established the accent, and Logan was just like, "Nope, not doing this."
We'll see. Maybe it's a regional thing. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's a regional dialect of gnoll.
Yeah.
There's the upper city gnolls, the lower city gnolls. They sound completely different.
Totally different.
They're posh British.
Yeah, and so it's interesting that Carson was one of the I say original. It makes it sound like some weird elite thing. Carson was one of the original players in my Sharn Nights group, but Alan was added whenever Austin had left because we only had 3 people, and I was like, I love playing with Alan so much, I gotta add him into this group, especially now that we're a person short, so let's add him in. And then also Jacob, being of course a very close friend of all of ours and also a regular D&D player, we added him in after we started streaming, and so it's gonna be fun to hear these sort of more recent new edition favorite things. So Alan, what has been your little favorite scene?
Yeah, and if I remember, I think I joined this campaign like a few sessions before we streamed it, right?
Yeah, you joined in on the theater murder arc, which was, I'm pretty sure, the arc right before the one we're doing.
Yeah, it was like in the middle. Yeah.
And it was like, I think the next session, Logan, you were like, "Yeah, by the way, I'm thinking about streaming this," and then we were just like, "Yeah, sure, let's see what happens." I think honestly my favorite moment, one of the beginning parts was that something happens encounter by the healing house when I had the
you
runs.
shit yourself. Yeah, you had some sharks. And honestly, Alan, I am so sorry that is a crowning moment of Wendellin's investigative career, is her sharding in an alleyway.
No, I think it's hilarious because she's supposed to be like this mysterious, badass character, just like the coolest motherfucker. And here's a moment she has to take a dump
defecating in an alley.
Yeah,
we've all been there.
Skipped over the part where Aragorn had the runs on Weathertop.
And and I'm one for that. I am always the person that whenever you watch a TV show or a movie or something, I'm constantly picking apart they haven't gone to the bathroom in a while, or they have not eaten a meal in 8 days. What, are they okay?
Yeah.
And so of course I'm also the DM that's gonna be I mean, it happened in the session tonight. I said, guys, it's 7 o'clock. you're fucking hungry. Like, because I want to, it's fun being able to, one, make a scene out of that, and also getting to paint a full picture of, like, the tastes and smells of the area that you're in. And also because I know Alan, as a person, loves that kind of stuff, so I want to be able to give that to you.
Worlds are more than just like
exactly
us fighting things. Like
exactly.
it makes a world feel more lived in if you're like, what's the food like? What's the floor look like? What's the place smell like? Like
what's the architecture?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so even though it was gruesome with Wendelin getting sharts and painting the inside of her pants, it's
gruesome is a great description.
It was gruesome.
gruesome.
I know that like that's not something you get to like hear all the time. It also like I feel like to some capacity everyone knows what it's like to go get some sketchy food and then within the 10 or 15 minutes you pay the price for it. And so like I like to imagine, you know, that scene of Wendelin getting the street hot dog with some you know, some like sketchy toppings, and then in the course of asking questions you gotta pay the price. I'm glad you liked that scene though. It's not one of the highlights, I might say. It's not something I reflect on. Okay, and Jacob, as sort of a new addition to the Sharn Nights team, what is, especially as a new addition, what is one of your more favorite scenes?
I guess not a scene, but I don't know if people hate it or not, but I love the say less thing because I kind of came up with that like on the spot, and I just love just being like say less,
say less. And it's
that
coming,
is a real
it's coming back
rule
around.
of lying. That is a real.
It's a
line.
real
good
rule.
advice.
I mean, yeah,
Like,
that makes sense.
I mean, that makes me sound like I'm some like practice liar. Like I'm like, yeah, I go on the streets, I lie to the kids, they give me their money. It's like, but that is a real established like rule for lying. Is that more you say, the more people have to pick apart and go, this is not the truth.
Well, that's fair.
So,
yeah.
And being a fan of charisma characters and things like that, you have to like, it helps suspend like disbelief if you can be kind of good at it, at lying without people having to be like, if you're in a situation where you're having to lie, if you can lie believably, it kind of helps everybody else get into the idea that you're lying. It goes like, before we started recording this, we were talking about like kinds of charisma, and I like to be believable in the approach. I don't know why Logan's laughing so hard. I've broken him.
You really got to him.
I don't know why. Well, anyway, I like to consider myself an actor, not a good one, not like a well practiced one, but I like to be able to try to portray characters realistically, and if you're a liar, that's just a thing you would do. I don't know. This got really derailed because Logan started laughing.
I'm so sorry. Don't just completely ignore it. And to respond to Jacob's thing, and Jacob's answer will absolutely transition us into the next thing. I was speaking to my partner just prior to us starting this about the difference between passive and active charisma, where I feel like if you look at the Sharn Nights campaign, I feel as though Donovan has very active charisma, where he talks to you and you're immediately assaulted. Sounds way too aggressive, but you're sort of like overwhelmed a little bit with his like, oh, he has tenacity, he has energy, like he's just a charismatic reporter. Whereas like Donovan and Spike are very much more passive charismas. Just the way that they hold themselves, very dark, mysterious.
Cornelius, right?
That's what I meant to say. Yes.
I knew what you meant.
You knew what I meant. Cornelius and Spike have very more passive charismas, and just the energies they give off, and the way that they hold themselves. So yeah, and that's such just an interesting way to carry a character. And so that's going to bring us to quite literally the second half of this. I know it's going to be a little different for Alan in this scenario, but it might be more interesting for you to talk about the relationship with your character. But we'll sort of start in a reverse way. Jacob, if you want to kind of talk about, like, you know, your relationship to Donovan, how you came up with the idea for Donovan, how you've developed him, how you've grown him as a character, and all sorts of that kind of stuff from the back end of character creation.
So when Logan was first like, hey, would you like to be on the stream? I thought, like, first of all, fuck yes. I want to be on the stream and play with my friends. But I wanted to make sure that I played something that I was comfortable showcasing to people that may not have ever played with me. And that's not to say that, like, this stream is, like, super huge and a bunch of people we don't know watch, but that was a possibility. And I wanted to make sure that I was able to showcase my strengths as a player. And so I knew I wanted to play a bard, because that's my favorite. It's what I'm really good at. It's on my water bottle. It's probably backwards, but it says bard, not drab. And to that end, I was like, what's an angle on a bard character that I have not done that would be interesting? And not only interesting, what would something that would be unique to this setting? Some kind of a bard that I could only play in this setting of Eberron and Sharn. And I was thinking, and I had a couple ideas, and I had like an idea for a wizard, but I was like, I don't want to step on people's toes what's already being done, because New Carts was playing Variant, and I didn't want to do the same thing he was doing. I wanted to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
So I was sitting there in my bed. It was like 3 a.m, and Logan can attest to this. I had an idea. I was like, a journalist. That's somebody that would talk. Logan's pulling it up. What time?
I was gonna pull
like,
up the receipts.
Someone who was someone who's a talker, someone who would have interest in solving crimes, or at least being a part of the investigative process, and that kind of, like, I didn't know anything else. I was just like, a reporter. That's what I'm gonna do. And I texted Logan at like 3 a.m, and then went back to bed.
Actually, I would like to note, funny enough, it was 2:00 a.m. Central Time, which means it was 3:04 his time. It was almost exactly 3 a.m. his time.
This is a very visceral
Yes.
memory for me.
Very
because
visceral.
it was like
Yes.
it was like an epiphany. I was like, that's
And-
it.
And, like, on that note too, like, and I think, you know, probably, like, Alan and Carson can attest to this as well. Like, personally, for me, my absolute favorite character creation thing is taking any of the normal, like, classes and reflavoring them for an urban setting. There's something
absolutely.
about that is, it's so fulfilling and gratifying. And so, like, Jacob, he's, like, that's his bread and butter, is playing sort of charisma, tactful, clever characters. But there's something about reflavoring that for an urban setting that is just, it unlocks a whole new level of creativity. That's so much more fun. It's so much more beyond just playing, like, oh, I'm the charismatic bard. Like,
I play an instrument. I sing the song.
No, he's playing a reporter bard in an urbanized world. Like, there's so much more creativity to it that I highly recommend. My own disclaimer: I highly recommend playing an urban adventure campaign, whatever, because there's just something else about it that unlocks some new stuff.
And I knew it was a good idea when Logan said, "This is a really cool idea," because I knew that Logan wasn't yanking my chain when he said it. Because my idea was like, I was like, if I say I'm playing a bard, Logan's gonna be like, of course.
And I
but
did.
the
I
fact that he was excited
100% did.
he was excited about it. I was like, okay, so this is why I know I've done something good here. But to wrap up my line of thinking so other people can talk, I knew I wanted to play a College of Eloquence bard, which made sense for the reporter thing. I decided I was trying to decide what race I wanted to be, and I knew there were already several people that were dragon marked, and I didn't want to mess with that, just because that would be too noteworthy. That would be somebody they would already have been on their radar, and I didn't want to worry about that. So I asked Logan what the status of tieflings were in Sharn, and he told me about them living in the waste and them not being like necessarily native to Sharn. And I thought it would be fun to be like a tiefling reporter, and that kind of wove its way in there. And we might talk about this later, but when it comes to like character inspiration, like I am a person where I just take media I consume and just kind of like most people in D&D, whether you're a DM or a player, just mash it together.
Yeah, I think that's mostly any creator on the planet is pulling from the things you consume.
So for like Donovan's like personality and like I guess some backstory things that haven't come up yet, and like his looks in general, like aesthetic, he is a mishmash of anybody who knows me know that I love One Piece, and I took the character Sanji and kind of mishmashed it with some like various characters from like the Yakuza games, because like somebody who used to be part of Crime Family, but I wanted to like play a character that has a very like dedicated sense of justice and reasons for pursuing it, but somebody who also has like a lot to lose and a great capacity for kindness, which kind of goes with like the stuff with his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what's really important about characters is having something that they care about and having something they really don't care about or really hate.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's just very simple ways to make your character feel like they're a real person and not just like a sheet of paper.
Yeah.
But that's kind of I guess we might talk about like how we make characters in general a little bit later, or if we have time.
Sure.
But that's how I made Donovan.
And also, even if you don't really care for fleshing out characters too much, just know that it will help your DM immensely, because then they give you a reason to be there. Because the moment, Jacob came to me and messaged me his backstory about how involvement in X criminal organization, or involvement with X other organization, or knowing certain people, I can drop that in and give his character a reason to be there, which is immensely helpful with storytelling. Now, on the flip side of that coin is Alan. So, Alan, I'll give my little preface for this. Alan was invited to play sort of as a not necessarily only as a one-off character, but just, here's some characters you could play for this one shot that might interest you. There was a stream on my Twitch channel a while back of literally making potentials for Alan's characters. Alan had kind of told me, like, yeah, here's kind of the character I would want to play, XYZ. And so I came up with some character ideas based on artwork I found. We streamed it. The chat helped me make the characters. And then I took those character ideas to Alan and said, what do you want to play? He chose, again, for a one-shot. Just like a, hey, sit in on this session. He chose the character. He sat in on the session. And now we have Wendelin. Like, that's the story for it. And so, like, whereas Jacob had these midnight revelations, and whereas other people have, weeks of mulling over characters, Alan was handed a lineup of characters he chose, and that's what he stuck with. So, Alan, my loving dear friend, What the
Yeah,
fuck are you
and-
doing right now? What's going on? What's happening?
And I wanted to see that stream so bad because I wanted to see the process, but then I knew like I would be spoiling some things for myself.
True.
He might say some things about the session that I don't want to hear or whatever. And yeah, and it was, I think I was picking, it was that, and the close second was like some failed director or something.
Yeah,
that
it was like
trying to
some
make it.
elderly goblin bard who was like a failed arts director in a certain district.
Yeah.
It was so
He looks so scummy.
he was like
I
a slam
loved it.
poet. Like it was so bizarre and stuff. And when making that, I was like, Alan's gonna pick this one. I just know it. It is so out there.
I was so close, but I think at the time, I was, going through your roster that you gave me, and I saw Wendelin, and I think the big thing that appealed for me was her monk background, the Order of the Alley, that we've briefly, every now and again, spritzed into. And I had been reading up at that point about the Guardian Angels of New York City. And for those that don't know, the Guardian Angels were this group that's back in like the 80s. A lot of the New York police force weren't able to properly protect local neighborhoods and stuff, and like local transits. So there was this group founded by this guy Curtis something Sliwa or something, and he basically got a bunch of guys. They wore these red jackets, and they just patrolled neighborhoods, and they went on transits, on subways, and they just guarded the place. So like whenever there was anybody trying to do like some petty thievery, or some trying to beat people up or something, or steal things or whatever, the Guardian Angels would be there. And so there was the community stepping in place of in the absence of police. And I really liked that idea, and as soon as I read your description of the Order of the Alley, I was like, I gotta play Wendelin. And yeah, it's been really fun. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't really plan too much for Wendelin.
I figured that, and that was kind of like what I was gonna ask. Is like, obviously, I think most of us can attest that Sharn Nights is a lot of improv and playing by ear most of the time. And so of course, I'm gonna be honest, I'm showing my hand here as a DM. Beyond me writing out Wendelin's backstory saying the Order of the Alley does this, I didn't really have too much like concrete material about the Order of the Alley besides just what I've been brainstorming. And Alan, I did not know about the New York Angels, so I'm gonna have to look into that, because that honestly sounds exactly like what I had in mind. And so when Alan, in many sessions ago, said, I'm gonna go visit the Order of the Alley and talk to some of my compatriots and people, I was like, oh fuck, I don't know what the hell is going on. And so it's a lot of improvising, and it's been a lot of fun because I love playing with Alan, and I know what you tend to like and dislike and what you grab onto, and so it's been a lot of fun to try and play around with that kind of stuff. And so, but my follow-up question sort of to this was like, what has it been like for you to sort of improvise this entire character's story? Because I mean, I gave you this blank, effectively a blank slate, and I also gave everyone else a blank slate. Jacob told me before joining the group, like, I'm gonna do research on everyone in the group before, because I mean, he's doing stories on you as investigators, so of course he's gonna research each of you individually. And I told him he researches Wendelin and finds nothing. Nothing at all. And so, Alan, how much fun or stress has it been to create this character effectively from scratch on live stream?
I think, I mean, here's the thing with D&D is I very seriously don't take this seriously.
No way.
I make a committed effort to try and not stress myself out.
And that's why I love you for it, because it can get so stressful sometimes. Continue.
And,
You're so aloof though, and it like the thing is like that's where you shine, is where like even when you're like I don't care, like it still comes through as like a concerted effort to play the game,
Mhm.
and
Thanks.
it's not
I'm
like you're like
trying
I don't
not to
care.
care.
You're sitting there like texting or something. Like you don't take it seriously, so you're able to be like very adaptive and not like get too set on one thing.
Mhm.
It's awesome.
Thanks. And that's exactly what I'm trying to go for. I'm because I guess I don't know. For me, I've I guess throughout my whole life, I've felt more natural, just kind of winging it, for better or for worse.
No way.
And,
I've definitely not known that about you since the moment I met you.
and I think a lot of my earlier, like when you Logan introduced me to D&D, I remember I spent several nights sometimes just like mulling over a character, trying to like figure out like, oh, what is this person, you know, what's their exact background, what do I want them to do. And I realized like I just hated that, you know, and it was stressing myself out when I wanted to like, you know, make this thing fun for me. So a lot of the times when I'm doing different characters, I don't plan most of it. There's usually like one anchor, one kernel of a thing that is like the constant with the character, and then the rest just kind of like flows into place. Like the Hrajak thing that we had last session.
Yeah, I was just before we started playing, I was talking to Rachel about that and how like again, Wendlan's a blank slate, and so I had you roll a history check about this sport, and you rolled like a 20 plus, and you ran with it. You were like, yeah, now Wendlan's a jock who knows all about this sport and gets super excited. It was awesome.
Yeah, because I'm like, there's no way she would know so much about a sport and not be like into sports in general.
Yeah.
You know? That's like,
And that made for a fun little side thing we
It was
did.
awesome.
Like,
And yeah,
and we kicked those guys' asses. Get wrecked, bear. I beat you with the power
he'll
of
be
my
back.
mind.
He's the murderer. He's the big bad.
One of my
I said,
favorite
"Stay
D&D
down."
memories is a scene with Alan and Xavier in one of Logan's Adventures Guild sessions we ran over the summer, wherein and like all three of us were playing Aasimar characters, and they were both playing Aasimar characters who did not know they were Aasimar. And so my older character was kind of trying to lead them along the way, and it just devolved into this hilarious sequences of like escalations wherein and like Xavier and I would provide a prompt and Alan would just improv the funniest reaction to it, like mathematically calculate what the funniest thing to do in that situation was. Alan did it, and it was just
It was amazing, to the point where like I'm planning on going back and like playing that out. Like I have to figure out what's going on. I love it.
If Alan's done, we should go to Carson.
Yeah, Alan, any final thoughts about your character and character creation stuff? Character development.
She's cool. I hope to figure out more of her.
Same. That's why I try to call on like Wendelin's vague history to advance some things. So much fun. And I have to tag in my own little footnote. I don't get to play as a player very often, and when I do, I revel in it. I love it. But truly, some of my favorite things I remember about playing as a player is with Alan. In any of the games I've played with Alan, the fact that we made Yahtzee canon in Andrew's first campaign is one of my favorite things. I have almost sent you a like bookshelf collector's edition of Yahtzee like 3 years in a row. And I'm like, you know what? I can't. I should not do that. He's moving
That'd be
around.
amazing.
He's moving. He doesn't need 3 editions of Yahtzee. But holy cow!
I think it got to a point like the rest of the group got mad because we were
They got so
literally
mad.
playing
We were
Yahtzee.
playing Yahtzee. That's it. It's so much fun though. And similarly, in Andrew's second reboot of that campaign, one of my favorite scenes, and I will try and act it out in this moment. At mine and Alan's character, I was playing a lion-themed tabaxi, and Alan was playing a turtle monk. We were roaming around this backwoods winter Arctic small town. We were shopping. We were just buying normal everyday stuff, as normal adventurers do. And the shopkeeper thought we were gay. And in that moment, mine and Alan's character turned to each other and just looked for a moment and looked back, and Alan said the most iconic words in response to thinking he was gay by saying, no, I'm fine. And so it then became now a sexual orientation to say, I'm fine. And so when people would ask, like...
I'm not ill with the gay.
No! And so now it's not, I'm gay, I'm straight, I'm bi, it's, I'm fine. And that's still, it's one of my favorite things. I still think about that like once a week. It has stuck with me.
Oh,
I
man.
love it. I love it. Let your friends improvise. It's so much fun. And I think because my character was also from a small farmy town, I didn't really know what he meant until later. Someone had asked us like, so how was your shopping trip? And I was just like, we're fine.
It was fine, yeah.
It's so funny. I love it. Oh, I love playing D&D with Alan. Oh, jeez. Anyways, Carson, after all of that nonsense, I don't want to say you have like the most complex character, but I feel as though Varian wears his complexity on his sleeve for the most part. But there's still
it's very nuanced.
Yeah, there's still so much stuff hidden. So I'm very eager to hear your
Actually, I want to know. Carson, do you prepare at all before sessions? Because Varian is so much.
It's so much.
Honestly, like before the session started, everybody was joking about me doing vocal warm-ups.
We should tell that story real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
So basically, just before we started streaming, of course, what we do is, you know how at the beginning of our Twitch streams, we stay on the starting soon screen for like 15 minutes? Most of that time is us bullshitting and chatting and doing whatever else. But part of that, Jacob had asked if we think that Carson does like vocal warm-ups and actor warm-ups before.
Because there's like a voice actor thing that I've seen where people will like say certain phrases to like get into character.
Yeah.
And I just because Carson was like he had joined the call, but he was like out preparing, so he was muted and
yeah,
face
and
cam
he
was
does
off.
that every time. He'll join the call and then mute and turn off his camera, and so it's very up in the air.
So, I was saying, like, do you think he's like getting into character, like looking in a mirror and going, anxiety, I can't disappoint my father, anxiety, I can't disappoint my father, and then he joins the call and he's like, I'm in character.
And
I actually do have a small ritual that I do. It's not so much like vocal warm-ups, like tip of the tongue, the teeth, the whatever.
The tip,
the lips, the teeth, the tip of the tongue.
The lips, the teeth, the tip of the tongue. No, I have a small ritual that I do. It's partially just to remember and get in the accent I'm using, because I really love doing accents for characters.
Me too.
And you can judge how good I am at it, but I'll just is like turn off my mic and just say my character's name a couple times in the accents. Just Varian de Madoni. Varian de Madoni.
Yeah.
Varian de Madoni.
That's very different from how I get into
I was
character.
about to say, and
Like a
also you
paper.
have quite the tongue twister of a name to prepare too.
Yeah.
for me, when I get into character, I take a folded newspaper and then I go throw it at my sister in the other room, and then I'm ready to go.
Shut up.
Hot off the presses.
I go, the paper. This
Yeah.
just in.
Anyway.
Yeah, I don't know who I am. I don't know who I am.
Blur face.
I think it would be an interesting topic for a later Sharn Nights is After Dark, to talk about like our approaches to role playing, because I love how Alan approaches it, but I approach role playing in a very different way. It like I mean, I very much do still like to like do bits and make out of character jokes and whatnot. I try to have more of like a D&D as acting approach.
That's
And
how I am as well.
So you have like a character idea in mind.
Yeah.
Already.
and like part of the thing with characters I've been playing for a long time, I mean, like Varian or my longest running character, Arthur from Austin's campaign, is like I gave them backstory, not as much backstory as I've given other characters, but part of it is I've just been playing them so long that like their backstory has developed as we've gone on through play. So it's not like I'm having to remember like like my family was all murdered and I have to act this way.
Man,
It's like
whose campaign would that be? That's crazy.
yeah, it's like in Austin.
No, and that's
You
an
leave the
excellent
bodies
point.
alone.
That's an excellent point, is that a lot of mistakes I feel like people make when they make characters in D&D is they have the character have already lived through all their character development.
Oh yeah.
Whereas
Don't live through the adventure already.
what I think what you're alluding to is like the character is being built from the moment you start playing to the moment you stop playing that character.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when I started, and I guess I'll get into a little bit of my building of Varian, and while we're on this strain, as Logan said, I was one of the original members asked to be part of this campaign before we even talked about streaming it. And when Logan asked me, this was this past spring when I was finishing out my last semester on my bachelor's degree, which was a really tough time. And there was basically a period where I just could not find a way to work from home in quarantine. But I reached a point where I was just like, well, I either got to push through or I'm going to have to take another semester. And I decided to push through. And I wrote like 50 to 60 pages over the course of like 2 weeks. And so I think, and honestly, it was only in the past like 20 minutes that I kind of realized this connection, and where Logan presented the setting to us and the fact that it was going to be like a very investigative focus campaign. I'm like, cool. Well, I really love wizards, so I'll play a wizard. What fun twist could I do? Because I always like to do twists or play against type. I think it can be fun to play into tropes, but I didn't want to do that for this campaign, especially with an urban setting being kind of unconventional. So it's just like, I'll do something interesting. So I was just like, what could a wizard be that would be like interesting to role play and give hook him into the world? And all right, I'm like, grad student. He's a grad student at a magic university, and the personality kind of built itself out from there.
What'll keep
So
him
it's just like-
trapped in the city?
It's just like I'm working like 10 to 12-hour days is writing like final papers, and I'm stressed as all hell. Like, imagine what somebody working on their magic grad degree must feel like.
and that has proven to be such a storytelling tool for me as the DM, because yeah, they're solving murders and stuff and they've reached a wall. What are they gonna do? And then I can throw in, hey Varian, you have a paper due tomorrow.
Yeah.
And it immediately increases the tension. Like
Carson's real world anxiety spikes. Like,
exactly. Like there's such another level, and this is a whole I could go for hours on this topic, but the absolute storytelling juices that come from having a family, being a part of an organization, having a job, like having those stable things in your life add to the drama tenfold when telling a D&D story. Like, ooh, don't be the orphan. Don't do it.
No, yeah, it's been so fun. Just like a lot of this stuff. I mean, some of it Logan and I talked about, but a lot of it he just springs on me, and I fucking love it.
It's so much fun.
And you have to just roll with the punches at that point.
Like yeah, when it's just like we're going to save this little boy in a mine, and I run into my cousin like making out with this random person, and I'm just like, well, cool, I gotta deal with this now. Or like my dad sits me down and he's just like, I feel you haven't been paying enough attention to your studies, and it's just like, cool, I get to role play through some trauma. Hell yeah, I'm here for it.
But of course,
And then Logan's like, "Oh yeah, your daughter's making out with this Chad she hasn't told you about," and you get to experience that with a bunch of people that you just started to get to know.
But of course, you should make sure you set boundaries with your D&D players, having the consent
Yeah.
forms and things.
Yeah.
As you could see tonight, I wanted to throw in like the charm and charisma of vampires, but not necessarily have sex like with my player character. So yeah, you gotta have those boundaries.
A less conscientious DM could have taken that to like a really dark place without player consent, and that would have been like really not okay. But Logan
God, no.
and is like a very good DM and very sensitive about approaching that. So it just turned into like we made a weird friend.
We made a weird friend, and similarly, we're getting so off topic at this point. We're 47 minutes into this, but
That's all right.
we'll
reel it back in after this.
We'll reel it back in after this. Like with talking about Varian's academic meeting, like I wanted to spring something on you revolving your family and revolving your internship and stuff, but I didn't want it to be something you didn't have a choice in. I most definitely want it to be like, hey, here's a conflict you kind of get to decide as a functioning adult in this university. And so like making sure your players have outs and choices and options.
Absolutely.
So now this could also be a whole thing in and of itself. But Carson, how has it been for you? This might be a little deep for the first episode of Sharn Nights After Dark, but playing a character with anxiety and, exhibiting those kinds of things, especially with the people you travel with.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I'll be open to it. Like, anxiety is something I've dealt with for a while. I mean, alongside depression and attention deficit disorder. It's a thing of, like, no matter how hard you try to build a character that isn't like you, there's going to be at least some nugget of you in them. It just depends on how much edge. And for Varian, and I mean, I'll say I don't deal with anxiety quite on his level, but it was something that I kind of wanted to explore and act out in this kind of like safe space. It can be really cathartic to work through stuff like that. I mean, even in front of an audience, and it's just like with your friends, and
Yeah.
I think it's provided for a lot of interesting like character development and role play interactions, and where it's just like, what does Varian want in this instance, and is his anxiety holding him back from that?
Mm-hmm.
And what's he gonna do with that?
Yeah.
And I think it's also a really interesting interplay to have off the other characters as in the party, just because it's like myself, Varian is an overthinker, or he analyzes things to perhaps an unhealthy degree. like how do you particularly phrase things,
Mhm.
and so as to like not offend people or get the best result. And like how to approach different situations in a very analytical way, and then you have somebody like Alan or Travis who are playing a very different kind of characters with more kind of just as like direct approach of just like let's just do the thing, and it
Mhm.
provides it's a lot of interesting and fun role play potential to work through. Um, but yeah, I would say anybody wanting to address mental illness in your games, whether DM or character, I would say try to address it in a respectful way, of course. But I have found addressing and such kind of darker topics, personal struggles can be really again cathartic and fun, so long as you've got a DM and a play group who are willing to play with you and be respectful of the subject matter.
And I think that's going to be a subject for another time, talking about what makes D&D groups work.
Oh god,
Uh,
so many
Oh,
things.
absolutely.
Yes.
That
so
I feel
many
like that'll
things
be a very good topic. It's for another
to
day,
connect all of it.
and that's
Yep.
definitely
Be a
something that I'd like
3-hour
to, a
special.
conversation I'd
Another
like to be a
thing.
part of.
I know.
But
so many things.
I think that before we wrap up, Logan, since we're a little over the time, which
A
I
little
kind of
over,
assumed
so-
that would happen.
It was
Whatever.
inevitable.
I think that before we, I guess, before we wrap up, if there's anything else everybody wants to say about just like making characters, about like approaches to
A
making
little
characters.
tidbit of advice.
If
I
if-
go ahead, Carson. No, after you, my friend.
Fight,
Oh,
gentlemen's fight.
Well, I'll just offer. I guess there's so much that goes into making characters and a lot of different perspectives. I will say for me, there are three components. Sorry, had to work that out. Three components that go into making characters that I find fulfilling to roleplay, and that is personality, motivation, and connections within the world. Because I think so much each of it is like, yeah, you can have a character who you're like, I'm gonna be snarky and fun, or I'm gonna be a dour and serious, but it's just like, if you have no motivations or no reason to be there, then it's not gonna feel real because that's not a real person, and that's a one-dimensional character. I mean, same with if you have this awesome epic backstory, and like a bunch of NPCs in the world, but you haven't sussed out like, does your character have a sense of humor, or like are they kind, are they gruff, if like are they caring, or are they more of a push them out the nest type, if like and finally a you can have if like a cool personality and a really awesome like motivation, but if you don't have any connections in the world, if you're just like, everybody I knew was dead and I have no allegiance to anybody but myself, then you're not giving
That's
your
no fun.
DM anything to work with.
Yeah.
And I think in the end it's going to feel less fulfilling than if you give yourself some hooks. But yeah, those are my 3 tips for creating a fulfilling character.
And if you don't want to, if you're afraid to like make a family or connections because you don't want your DM to like murder them or anything, tell your DM that. Just say, hey, please don't kill my parents. And they should do that. Like, it should be that easy.
Yeah, I never had that conversation with Austin.
Yeah, fair.
Austin's gonna watch this later and be like,
Oh, shit.
"Well, you didn't ask."
Yeah. So yes, and like that's something that I like. I've kind of had that experience a little bit before too. It's like, oh, I don't want to interact with things of that nature, so please don't. And yeah, just have that conversation.
And that brings in what I was gonna say is when you're making a D&D character for a campaign, talk to your DM and your other players and see what they're doing, because nothing is more frustrating than making a character you're really excited about and realizing that it is incongruent with everybody else and what they're doing, or accidentally making something that someone else is already doing, or like having conflicting ideas. Because when you make a character, you kind of want to know where everybody else in the group is leaning morality wise, unless you're prepared to have the conversation about your party's morality as a whole and like that dynamic, because it can be really engaging, as Carson kind of talked about, is having people that have different mindsets. But it can also be really frustrating if everybody is a mindset and you're the opposite mindset and you feel like you're the dead weight or you're the one that's always at odds with everybody else. And that just goes into communication. Like, talk to your DM, talk to the other players. Because as much fun as it is to be like all secretive about what kind of character you're playing, I think it's much more fulfilling in the long run to be like, what's everybody playing? What kind of vibes are we going for? Are we going to be killing people? Are we going to be saving people? Are we going to do a little bit of both?
And also, with for the DM's perspective, like, have an idea of what kind of like campaign or adventures you're going to want to be doing, because it has worked out splendidly in Carimia, but we have done some heavy political stuff, which is not ideal for our barbarian, who has been at the head of that political stuff. And so,
weirdly enough.
Yeah, and he's the most equipped to do it for some reason. And so, like, and for our Sharn Nights stuff, I told them this is going to be investigation and role-playing. There is room for a barbarian, of course, as we've seen for this event, and also because combat is inevitable in D&D at some points, and why we have a monk now. But, I mean, of course, for certain campaigns, you will get certain mileage out of certain classes more than others. And so communicate with your DM about what kind of stuff, with avoiding spoilers, what kind of stuff to expect.
Because it's very easy to be like, hey, we're going to do a heist adventure. And then you're like, all right, I'm definitely going to make sure that I'm making a character that's congruent with that. Or congruous with that. That's just the big thing. Communication. Talk about what you want, what you don't want, and what other people are trying to do. Because probably 100% of every problem that I've ever experienced in D&D comes down to a lapse in communication.
And if you listen to any other D&D podcast or YouTube series about this kind of thing, it usually boils down to talk to your players, talk to your DM, talk about it, communicate.
Yeah.
So just do it. We don't need to repeat it.
What about you, Alan?
Yeah, Alan.
I guess I would say to help make a character that fits with the session and the story and your party. Make your parameters less restricting. So don't like I guess when I'm making a character, I don't stare at D&D Beyond. I'm not staring at the classes and races and stuff. I kind of hear the premise of the session that I'm about to walk into and try and make a character that may or may not work into that. Or if I'm really want to have fun, I just pick a concept and find a way to fit it into there. I've had sessions where I just thought, okay, I want to be a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. Okay, I'll be a turtle monk.
Conversations.
This was a real conversation we had. That's not a lie.
I want to be like a linebacker. I'll be an elf barbarian.
True.
Also a real conversation.
Shout out to our first ever stream.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess because I think all the tools that Dungeons and Dragons provides for DMs and players, it's just that, it's tools. But the real spark, the real the essence that makes us want to keep playing it over and over is it is so malleable. right? So don't restrict yourself by just seeing what's in, like, the player's handbook for at face value, I mean, of course, talk to your DM and other players just to make sure you're not gonna, like, break anything, but yeah, just use your imagination and create something that for you would be worthwhile to play.
Hell
That's
yeah.
awesome. Dig it.
Well,
Absolutely. And
unless anybody else has anything to say, we should wrap it up.
I just have one more comment on what Alan just said before we wrap up. And yeah, part of for those that don't know, Alan and I lived together there for about a year, and my conversations with Alan, where he was pitching me D&D ideas, were just the most fun, because as Alan, as he just alluded to, is somebody who's just like, okay, here are the rules as written. How far can I stretch these to go for something I find cool and
Yep.
fulfilling to
Uh-huh.
do? And like,
Yep.
a lot of people would have a problem with this, but I think the reason, and it's never a problem with Alan, is he always approaches it in good faith. He's never trying to one up the DM or one up the other players. He's always just like, hey, I have something cool I want to do. How can I make it happen? And I love that.
Yes. And and especially in what we alluded to earlier with the brief campaign with the 3 Azamars, there was a section of the campaign where they got to show off magical abilities and use their magic in unconventional ways, and I was just waiting. I was chomping at the bit to see what Alan would do with his spells, and good God, he had some crazy ideas he was texting me about. It was amazing.
So good.
It was so good. So, I feel like we strayed very far from the topic, but it was still...
It was all on topic.
It was... Sure it was. So,
But it was more on topic than it would have been if we had not laid things out beforehand.
True. It was still so much fun, and maybe we can get into more detailed stuff at future sessions. Honestly, I'd be down to do this every week, but I know it's late. So we shall see. We shall see.
Maybe we'll adjust that, because I also really enjoyed this.
I enjoyed this a lot.
Same.
Thank you, the 3 of you, for being here. It was amazing. I
mean, I'm
love
the executive producer, man. I have to be here.
Okay, well, all right.
Thanks for having us, Logan.
Yeah, I mean,
Jacob has no breaks.
Jacob has a break. It was so
No,
much fun.
we're pedal to the metal for content.
Yeah, Jacob truly is my producer.
We were but humble jesters.
Oh my gosh. Thank you to my Patreon people. Thank you to Jacob for being a supporter. I got the email a minute ago.
You're welcome. I had $1.
So yes, thank you all my patrons for being such wonderful supporters, and the more support we get, the more we can do things like this. It's so much fun. And you can hear more about the wacky things that go through our minds while playing D&D. But I think until then, until next week, everyone have a wonderful night. This is Sharn Nights After Dark. I'm still not sold on the name. I still want to do morning.
I like After Dark.
Gah! Anyways,
I still think it should be Sharn Nights
at night. I also like that.
It's so dumb, but it's really
so
funny.
dumb. It's so dumb. But thank you, everyone. Thank you, my players here. Everyone have a lovely night, and we will see you next week. All right, good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.